This is for
Yeah.
you.
Fly was flying on the team. Touchdown, touchdown. Time to get Jalen this ring. You don't really want to start a thing. This a Bird Gang Nation, baby. It's a Philly thing. Hater, and you looking like you type trash. I'm just here calling on Philly the podcast. And we can call a man dog or watch Miles score off the handoff. Rest of the division, your man soft. Jackson like Sean, hunting like Randolph. Season head, really time to do him in. Your boy Philly Fresco. Thanks for tuning in.
What's going on, you guys? It's your boy Joe Castro, aka Philly Fresco, and it is another episode of Philly the podcast. So today we're gonna dive deep into this Eagles versus Green Bay Packers game, and to do that, I got my guy Jacob. Jacob, how's it going today, man?
Doing well. It'd be a hell of a lot better if my team was sitting at 9-1 like you guys are. But I gotta tell you, man, that's the best intro I have ever seen.
I appreciate that.
Really good. Yeah, we should.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
and we were talking prior to hitting live and everything. And one of those parts you'll probably remember, obviously, from the Philadelphia "This Is For You." You were actually at that game, so why not just start there? Because I didn't know that coming into this. So how did you end up there, first of all, and how was that? How was that environment?
It was, to answer the question about the environment, it was incredible. When you hear about the Super Bowl, you always hear like, oh, it's a corporate event. There aren't that many fans, blah, blah. That wasn't true. Eagle fans were in mass in that Super Bowl. And I mean, I will never forget at the end of the game, Eagle fans like doing the skull chant, but they were saying Foles, which they did the 2 weeks prior when they beat up on Minnesota. But just had an opportunity to work for one of the video companies that's with the NFL. My claim to fame is I was in the same end zone as the Philly special. And the guy who was on my camera got the shot of Brandon Graham strip sack. So if you guys see the shot from the sideline where Graham strips Brady, that was my guy. I think the most memorable part of the game for me is like when the time stopped. Brady throws the Hail Mary at the end of the game. And then I feel like the entire stadium looked at the clock when it hit zero, or when the ball hit the ground. And then before I could figure out that the game was over and the Eagles had won, I was covered in confetti and the Eagles are storming the field. It was incredible. I know it's easy for me to say this, but if you guys can get to a Super Bowl, even if your team's not playing in it, it's an awesome experience. And maybe just because it was the Eagles fan base that was there and the Patriots fans were there too. That was still pretty cool. And as much as I hate it, like the Patriots are, for my lifetime, the best dynasty that we'll probably ever see. So getting to see that, I obviously have a bit of a connection with the Eagles as well. So being able to see them win that championship, we're not supposed to root for teams when we're working, but I was definitely rooting for the Eagles that day. And I root for them whenever they're not playing the Packers. So this weekend, I am definitely rooting for the Packers. But
I was about to say, did we get you on our side?
No. But when the season effectively ends for Green Bay, which will probably be Sunday night when they're mathematically eliminated, yeah, go Birds.
Yeah. So it's going to be interesting. We're going to definitely talk. That's dope, though. I mean, that Philly special, it's funny that you're on the show because that Philly special obviously means a lot to me. I based my whole show basically off of that, Philly and everything. The intros got everything to do with it. So it's awesome. It's cool to see somebody or speak to somebody that has a different, point of view from it. So that's awesome, man. Go Birds, man. You got to love it. I think everybody, collectively, there was a lot more air in the world when that throw went up, when Hail Mary went up. Everybody in Philadelphia had their, holding their breath. So it was just so much more oxygen in the world at that point. So it was a beautiful day. But so we're here to talk about this Sunday night, though. I want to start here, man. I want to ask, who is this Packers team? Because obviously standing at 4-7, it's not record-wise where you want to be. But you guys have beaten some good teams, and it's confusing sometimes. So who is this team? Well, where do you stand? And just what is the feel out there in Green Bay about this team right now?
I think if you put truth serum into most of us, we kind of know it's over. They're not running the table. There is no, I know the last run the table was in 2016, and that started with a Monday night game against Carson Wentz and these Eagles. And the Packers ended up winning 6 in a row and getting all the way to the NFC title game, beating the Cowboys, which they seem to do all the time, which is a very large departure from my childhood where the Cowboys kicked the crap out of us every time we played them. So I kind of am enjoying being on this side of that now. But It's over. This team's not very good. They don't do anything particularly well. And I think and a couple weeks ago we played Dallas, and I was talking to a couple Cowboy fan friends of mine, and they were like, "Wow, you guys still got Aaron Rodgers, so I'm still afraid of you guys." And okay, so maybe for that game that turned out to be okay. For the most part, it's just Rodgers. I don't know if he's washed up. I don't know if his thumb is hurt. I don't know if he wasn't all the way committed to coming back. And I'm not going to speculate on things like that, but he's not able to kind of lift the team around him. I think the team is under talented at the skill spots. They relied on rookies and Sammy Watkins's corpse to help replace Devontae Adams. That has not gone well. They built their team over a 3 or 4 year period since Brian Gutekunst has taken over to try and be a team that wins by playing defense and running the football. Anybody who has watched the NFL for the last 2 decades knows the game is slanted toward the passing game. So I think that is a poor way to try and build your team. They're not very good on defense, which is what was supposed to be their calling card. And they weren't very good before their best player got hurt. Rashawn Gary is now out for the season. He was their best guy. So the feel for this team is the Eagles are wearing all black on Sunday, and it's probably dressed appropriately because it's a funeral for this Packers team. They'll be competitive enough. And then we're all kind of looking forward. And I mean that meaning ahead as to, what does this team do when they're mathematically eliminated? Does Jordan Love start starting games? Is Jordan Love going to be the starting quarterback in 2020? I tend to think no, but is Aaron Rodgers going to come back at all? This is a guy who contemplated retirement this offseason. And I kind of believe, I think it was Bill Parcells, somebody, I can't remember who it was, but he said, once you start thinking about retiring, you're already retired. And, Rodgers wasn't around for spring ball, wasn't around for the off seasons 2 years ago because of a holdout, this past year because the team basically said you don't need to do it. And I think that has hurt them to some degree as well with as many new pieces as they have around them. And some of the guys on their team aren't playing as well as they should, so that's really the basis of it. I think we have gathered, and I watch a lot of Eagles football, and I sit back a lot of times and think that these two teams play 2 different sports.
I get it. And it's crazy to see how far of a drop the Packers have taken. And I will say this from a fan's perspective, from people that don't necessarily watch the Packers every day, it feels like you got rid of Devontae Adams and everything fell off and it just fell. But I don't feel like that's the only reason. I feel like there's a lot of things kind of going on out there in Green Bay. And one of those things being I see a funny trend. I feel like looking at the Packers wins, when they have a win, you see 30 carries between Aaron Jones and the back. I'm blanking on his backup.
AJ
Dillon. Thank you. But between the two, you see usually a 15-18 type split. They're getting a good amount of carries. Is that, you said it, that they kind of built their team to win off defense and running the ball. If the Eagles are to see the Packers that run it 30 times, is that something we should be worried about? Or is that just kind of a coincidence that when they're winning, they're getting those type of numbers?
Yeah, that is the formula, if you will, for this Packers team, because they can't, and they weren't able to do this when Devontae was here either, is the drop back passing game. If they're just going to be able to drop back and throw it 30 times, this isn't the receiving core. And it wasn't even when Devontae was here, like I said, that had, Greg Jennings, Jordy Nelson, the group that was on the cover of Sports Illustrated. It wasn't that. It hasn't been that in quite a while. One of the reasons they were successful against Dallas is they were able to run the ball like that, and they hit their shots. That's the other thing, is I think Rodgers only had 20 passing attempts in that game, but they hit some deep balls. Christian Watson caught 2 touchdown passes for more than 30 yards in that particular game. And the offense has been better when Watson has been able to play. The problem is Watson's been in and out of the lineup, and the margin for error, we've seen this, San Francisco 49ers, Tennessee Titans of, the last couple of years. Those are teams that are built around, we have to play our game this style. And if it's not played this way, Minnesota with Adrian Peterson was that way for years. They can't win. And Green Bay can't win if they get into a game if the Eagles are up 17-7, the Packers have a hard time sticking to their running game. And AJ Dillon hasn't played particularly well this year either. And like I said, when you build your team around running the ball in 2020, this isn't the Big Ten. These are not the Michigan Wolverines. The Packers are not built to line up and ram it down your throat because they drafted all their offensive linemen based around their ability to be pass blockers. So they're not built like road graders. And Aaron Jones is a really good back, but he's even kind of taken a step backward from what he has been. You know, the guy that you guys saw in 2020 that had that big touchdown run at the end of that game to basically ice it after the Rager punt return. I don't know if that player's in there anymore. And that's not to say he's not still a really good player, but I don't know if he is that anymore. A.J. Dillon looks more like Plodzilla than Quadzilla. That's been a problem. And then, you know, most of their games, they're not able to hit shots down the field, and you've got to be able to create those explosive plays in today's game. So it's the formula. I just don't know how well they can execute said formula. And a lot with the way teams are built around the NFL, it's just really hard to play that way. And they kind of were fortunate that, you know, Dallas, that was a game where they were able to execute that formula, but it was kind of based on Dallas's own undoing. Dallas was winning by 14 points going into the fourth quarter. They just kind of got a little fortunate that for whatever reason, Dallas got in their own heads and didn't do whatever they were supposed to do. So it's their formula, but and after watching the Eagles play Sunday against Jonathan Taylor, I don't know if Green Bay is going to be able to run for, you know, in order to win this game, they have to run for $160, $175 and hit some of those balls down the field. Where this Eagles secondary, that's not, you know, the days of, and I love him in Green Bay, but like Rasul Douglas in Philadelphia, that wasn't Rasul Douglas in Green Bay. They don't get beat for those big plays like that. So I think it's going to be tough sledding for Green Bay on offense in general.
Yeah, it's crazy to see what Rasul Douglas has been able to do, getting a game-winning interception for you guys. And I'll say one thing.
He's awesome. I love that guy.
There's a lot of Eagles fans that liked him. There was a lot of Eagles fans. We even seen Alex Singleton. He's over there, I think, in Denver right now, having himself a season, just a crazy season as far as tackles. So it's nice to see some of these guys that we push to the side go and have good careers elsewhere, but it also hurts a little bit, right? You know, it kind of stings a little bit, but it's nice to see them. Now we've talked a lot about, you know, the downside of the Packers and everything, but they have won some good games. They have played some good games. So I want to ask you, who, if anyone, in your opinion, is keeping the Packers together, or is this a team that you look at the end of the year and you say, we're kind of, you know, we're at the base level? Like, is there someone on this team? For so many years, it was Aaron Rodgers, right? Mm-hmm. Is there someone on this team now that you look at and say, listen, at least we got this guy, and, you know, the future's bright with this guy?
Rashawn Gary is one of them, and he's not going to play Sunday. He was developing into one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. The guys that are currently playing, Romeo Doubs probably not going to play on Sunday. Matt LaFleur said he wasn't ready to count on that. But Christian Watson's been the story the last 2 weeks. Yeah. Hit a deep ball against Dallas that kind of it was funny because if you stop the Dallas game after the first quarter, you're thinking like Christian Watson's had 3 chances to do something like a quote unquote real wide receiver, and they've all been drops. And then as the rest of that game plays out, Watson catches the deep ball to get them kind of going. He catches a pass on 4th and ball game, which at the time was 4th and season. Cause like if Green Bay's 3-7, then, you know, it doesn't really matter what they did against the Titans on Thursday night. It wasn't really going to matter. Watson has been a heavily scrutinized pick. He was a guy that they traded 2 second-round picks for to get at the top of the second round. They tried to trade back into the first round to get him. He played at North Dakota State. And there's a receiver in the other Pennsylvania team that's the Pittsburgh Steelers that they drafted in George Pickens that seemed to be a guy that kind of fit what Green Bay typically likes. And he got off to a much better start. Obviously, Watson's first impression was, I don't know if you guys saw it, but the first play of the season for the Packers was Rodgers loads up. Watson is wide open for a walk-in touchdown, and he just dropped it like right through his hands. I don't even know how to explain it. And then he, you know, was in and out of the lineup with injuries throughout the course of the year. But the last 2 weeks, 5 touchdown receptions. I believe he still leads all rookies in terms of touchdown, or he's maybe tied with Chris Olave or something like that now. But I think that's a guy who, if with Watson and Dobbs, if they're able to develop down the line, and Green, you know, the optimistic view for 2023 is, okay, Watson takes a jump, Dobbs takes a jump, and they add a veteran who's actually useful to this team as opposed to Sammy Watkins, who, I mean, no disrespect, Sammy's had a decent career as an NFL receiver, but he's just not very good right now. I think you and I might beat him in a race at this point.
I don't think me, but hey,
I was never that fast of a runner either, but I mean, I give it a shot. You know, if they add a veteran who's actually useful, and I'm not saying they got to trade 2 first-round picks for, you know, or make a trade to the significance that the Eagles made with A.J. Brown, but just find a useful veteran. then you're like, okay, I can start at least looking towards some optimism for 2023. And that really does. It starts with those 2 rookie receivers, Dobbs, who won't play Sunday, and then Watson, who presumably will.
So hearing you say maybe adding a veteran, this is kind of a random question, but is there any seller's remorse in Green Bay when it comes to Davante Adams, or do you guys feel money-wise that was the best decision for you? Because I know that it's a business at the end of the day, and sometimes we got to take our feelings out of it and say, hey, we just weren't going to be able to do it. But is there a little bit of seller's remorse in Green Bay on the whole Davante Adams situation?
Yeah, for me, there always was. And unfortunately, with the Rodgers situation that took place starting in the offseason after the Bucs lost in the NFC title game where he said he didn't want to come back, the Packers were basically like, okay, well, we can't commit to a record-setting contract for a wide receiver when we don't know who the quarterback's going to be. And then by the time they figured out who the quarterback was going to be, the situation with Adams had been too far gone. Brian Gutekunst, Mark Murphy, Matt LaFleur even to some degree have kind of talked about how they feel like that situation, Adams was just ready to move on. He's from that area where he plays now in Las Vegas. They got a first and a second round pick, which was kind of the best deal they could feasibly get for him, while also trying to do what they feel was doing right by the player, because Adams wanted to play there. In theory, they could have started a bidding war and maybe something happens from there. I don't know. I don't mind the way that they did that. The way that it's pitched is that Green Bay was able to then re-sign Rasul Douglas, Devondre Campbell, signed Jaron Reed, and then they took Quay Walker with the first round pick that they got from the Adams trade. And everybody was like, well, would you rather have those 4 guys or that one guy? And my answer was always the one guy, because the one guy was Davante. And I mean, Davante is, I've been watching the Packers since 1995, so I just missed Sterling Sharp. Davante Adams is the best receiver I have ever seen play in Green Bay. And nothing against those guys, Dre, Rasul, Quay Walker, who I think is going to be good, but none of them have ever shown to be elite players. Davante Adams, when they traded him, was the best receiver in football. And you guys just saw again on Sunday against the Broncos, that was Pat Surtain that he dotted up for 10 catches and 150. I mean, he is a absolute star. So it's not really seller's remorse, because I think we all kind of have an understanding that Adams just, was ready to move on. And I understand wanting, as a receiver, some stability at the quarterback spot, because he just didn't know how long is Rodgers going to play. Am I going to have him, I'm going to sign here for 5 years, which was the deal he got in Las Vegas. Am I going to do that and play with Rodgers for 1? And then, realistically, this could be Green Bay's. They could have 30 years of quarterback stability with Rodgers and Favre. And then this year would be Rodgers. If Rodgers retires, next year could be Jordan Love. And then if they don't pick up Love's 5th-year option, you're talking about then the year after potentially being another new quarterback. He could have had 3 quarterbacks in 3 years. So I understand why he wanted to. And Derek Carr, best friend, that storyline's been discussed ad nausea for 6 months since the trade's been made. So not really seller's remorse. It's just it's an unfortunate thing that happened because of the way that the Rodgers situation played out after they lost to Tampa in 2020. And then by the time they were ready to kind of commit that contract, it was too far gone. So it stinks, because you like those guys to stick around, but that just is what it is.
Yeah, that's the business side of it, unfortunately. I mean, I think that this season, I think a lot of teams can say we didn't see this coming. I mean, for better or worse. I think you look at, teams like the Seahawks, they definitely didn't think that they would be sitting where they are record-wise with Geno Smith. You look at even the Eagles, and this kind of brings me to my next question. I don't think Eagles fans expected to be this good this quick. I think that we knew we were building something. I think we understood what was going on in the building, and we got some special players, even with the wide receiving position. You talk about exchanging those 4 players for 1 guy. Eagles tried to do that for years on top of years, just going through wide receiver. Finally, we just gave up the assets and we go and get that guy, and we see the production. But I know you watch the Eagles. I know you have kind of a special connection to the Eagles, which we'll get to. But I want to know from an opponent's POV, from an opponent's point of view, looking at the Eagles, what stands out about the Eagles so far?
First and foremost, I would say when the Eagles hired Nick Sirianni, after watching his first press conference and then hearing some of the anecdotes about the rock, paper, scissors thing and just I was like, oh my God, they hired a boob. Like the Philadelphia Eagles that hired, in my opinion, Doug Peterson, who I think is really smart. They hired Andy Reid prior to that with a little Chip Kelly sprinkled in there too, but whatever. We won't get too
we
much
try to forget too. Don't worry.
Yes. But I mean, Andy Reid's a Hall of Famer. He's going to be a Hall of Famer based on what he did in Philadelphia. Doug Peterson they have a statue for him. I was like, oh my God, they hired a boob. And now I look at Sirianni and I'm like, he's one of the best coaches in the NFL. And just the way that entire offense, I bought Philadelphia stock going into this season, and I bought it based on quarterback upside and just the group they have around him. I love Dallas Goedert, the tight end, who unfortunately is injured, not going to play this weekend. Devontae Smith, I really liked him when they took him. We can talk maybe, speaking of buyer's remorse, I wonder if maybe there's some there since they picked him in front of Micah Parsons, who happens to be in Dallas now. And then when they got AJ Brown was one of my favorite receivers in the entire league. I'm just like, okay, like if Jalen Hurts can progress at all, they're going to be one of the best teams in football. I picked them before the season to play in the NFC Championship game against the San Francisco 49ers. So I kind of bought the quarterback upside there with Trey Lance as well on that side of things. But I just think the way that whole offense fits together, their creativity, the individual playmaking with Smith and AJ Brown, the running game, solid if unspectacular. And Miles Sanders, I think, is pretty good. I think they've got some nice pieces behind him that they maybe use a little too often with Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I feel like they could just kind of ride Miles Sanders. And really, my biggest thing with the Eagles and why I've bought them is the way Howie's built that team on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I think on the offensive and defensive lines, the Eagles are the best team in the NFL. And I'm not sure if there's a close second in terms of just how they're able to play when they're healthy on the line of scrimmage. Kelsey's been there for a long time. Lane Johnson obviously has been there for quite a while. They lost Brandon Brooks, who was an all-pro guard, and I almost feel like you wouldn't even know that.
Yeah,
and then even before they signed Sue and Joseph and traded for Robert Quinn, I thought going into the season they were too deep on the defensive line where they can just kind of rotate defensive tackles, rotate defensive ends, and away we go. And now they can really do that if they get Jordan Davis back. I know he's due back here in a couple of weeks. They'll have Sue and Joseph, obviously, Fletcher Cox, who is a Philadelphia Eagles Hall of Famer, team Hall of Famer, and then their pass rushers with Reddick and Robert Quinn and all those guys that they have. I just think their ability on the line of scrimmage, and this is why I think when people are like, oh, who's the best team in the NFC? The Eagles. And it's because of those things, and that's with all due respect to the 49ers and the Cowboys, and those are the three teams, I think, if you're saying if you got to pick three teams to bet on to make the Super Bowl in the NFC, those are the three teams I would bet on. But I think the Eagles are a cut above just because they have an ability to get after the quarterback, and they have an ability to now, I think, stop the run with Joseph. And like eventually they could have rundowns where they run a base front with Linval Joseph and Jordan Davis. And then they get to the passing downs and it's Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave. Like that's unprecedented. All four of those guys start for other teams in a different spot. That's crazy to me. That's what I think is the best part about this team on both sides of the ball. They are the best team in the NFL on the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. It definitely is a beautiful thing. And it's been a while since we've built up like this. So I'm excited, man. I'm excited for this game. I think it'll be interesting. I never get too up or too low on teams prior to. I don't care what their record is because you never know, especially with this year. This NFL season has been insane. But the last question I kind of want to ask you, man, is I want to, it's a little bit deeper than sports. I read your last article, speaking about basically how or why, I should say, you actually have such a knowledge of the Eagles. And I want to talk to you. I want to ask you, what do you think? God rest your father. So first of all, my condolences, all that, all my prayers, man. It's always tough. My father passed away and football was kind of how we bonded as well. He was a Giants fan and that's how I became an Eagles fan. Yeah, I know it's weird, but I'm glad to hear somebody that kind of has something similar. But what do you think Pops would say going into this game, knowing that the Eagles are atop the NFL? How would it feel going into a game like this? And just what do you think he would be saying right now going into this game?
Yeah, I've been on both sides of that coin. Obviously, I was born in 1991. I grew up in the mid 2000s when the Packers were okay, but the Eagles were playing in the NFC Championship game every year. I was 12 for 4th and 26, so that was not very much fun. And then a few years later, that would have been 7 years later, when Tramon Williams picked off Michael Vick to end a playoff game, I was probably 19 when that happened. The Packers won the Super Bowl that year. We had what we called the 24-hour rule. So that means when the game starts, we don't talk about it. And then when the game ends, you got 24 hours to let that person process their emotions and go from there. My dad was kind of a fatalist when it came to the Eagles, always kind of expected the worst. And maybe that's because he grew up in the Jaworski era, in the 80s and the 90s with Randall Cunningham and Buddy Ryan. And then, I think wherever he is right now is still cussing at Richie Kotite and that group as well. But I think he would feel pretty confident about this team because I think of, what I talked about with trench play. That's something that he would talk about pretty frequently with their ability to do some of those things. Donovan McNabb was his favorite quarterback ever. And I think that Jalen Hurts has some similarities. They're not the same player, but I think there are some similarities there between Hurts and McNabb. I don't think Hurts is going to be puking on the field during the Super Bowl, but Donovan is a Hall of Very Good type of quarterback, an Eagles Hall of Famer certainly as well. So, I think that we'd have a pretty good understanding because I'm pretty realistic. Like I think I laid out earlier in talking about what I think this Packers team is and is not. So we'd have a pretty good understanding of that. And then we always had kind of the gentleman's agreement that, hey, when my season's over, we're on your side. And when your season's over, I'm on my side. What kind of way that goes. So it was special in that way. I remember 2010 after that Michael Vick, Tremont Williams game, he texted me probably 20 minutes after the game was over, said, okay, congrats. I'm rooting for you guys now. And they were able to win a championship that year. So that was pretty cool. And then I got to text him after they won the Super Bowl that I was in the stadium for. So I think he'd be happy. I think he'd be proud. I'd be lying, like I said in the article, if I said I want the Packers to win the Super Bowl like I do every year, but I'd be lying if I said that an Eagles Super Bowl may not mean just as much just to me personally, considering it was, 10 months ago tomorrow that everything happened and everything kind of changed. So we're happy. We're proud. We sit and we watch the Eagles. I have a 3-year-old and a 2-month-old, and I tell them like, you can pick between two favorite football teams. You guys can like the Packers or you can like the Eagles. I kind of like both. So, we can all kind of like both if you guys want to do that too.
I love it, man. Yeah, it's funny. Me and my girl talk all the time about, when we eventually have kids. She's a Phillies fan. I'm a Yankees fan. So we're like, Eagles, they got to be an Eagles fan. Exactly.
Were you guys together for the World Series in 2009?
We were not. No, we were not. Luckily, because honestly, this Phillies one, I was so angry with her. Like she's a Philly girl to the heart. You know what I mean? So she was definitely in my face, letting me know every week, every day, I should say, that the Yankees weren't in the World Series. But we already said we got to be Eagles fans. Our kids have to be Eagles fans. We'll let them pick what baseball team, but Eagles, that's locked down. But Jacob, I appreciate not only your time but your openness. I'm going to put the link to your article in the description to this video. Anybody that's watching this now or watching it back, I highly recommend reading that article because it was beautifully written. And I think that it shows how much deeper football and sports in general is. Because when I read it, I was like, this is me and my father. So I really love it, man. And Jacob, you gave us some great insight. So I really do appreciate it. Before we do get out of here, can you please let them know where they can find your work and where you're doing your work?
Sure. So you can follow me at Jacob Westendorf, my name below right there. I'm real creative with my Twitter handle. At Game On WI, I'm the owner of that website, which is where you'll find the article. And then I also write for 24/7 Sports. Packer Report is the name of that. So you can follow them at Packer Report 66. Thank you, Joe. I appreciate you having me on. Like I know a while ago, I was talking to another Eagles site, seeing if I could maybe do something for them. It didn't work out for various reasons, which is totally okay. But getting a chance to kind of talk about this team too, because obviously I think if nothing else, what shines through is maybe not to the same level as the Packers, but I do have a lot of passion about this Eagles team as well. So I appreciate you giving me an opportunity to do that.
Definitely, man. It was my pleasure, man. This was a lot of fun. So, and maybe this won't be the last time. I'm sure it won't be the last time. You put a mic in front of our face and we'll go for a half hour anytime. So, good luck to you guys on Sunday, even though I probably don't mean that as much as I say it out loud. But happy Thanksgiving, man. And I just hope you and the family have a great holiday, brother.
Thanks, Joe. I appreciate you having me.
Yes, sir. And I appreciate everybody tuned in. Be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe. But other than that, you guys know what it is, man. It is Fly Eagles Fly. And we are out of here. Peace.
Yeah, fly was flying on the team. Touchdown. Time to get Jalen this ring. You don't really want to start a thing. This a bird gang nation, baby. It's a Philly thing. Hater, and you looking like you type trash. I'm just here calling on Philly the podcast. And we can call a man dog or watch Miles score off the handoff. Rest of the division, your man saw Jackson like Sean.